You're now in tuned with near-death experiencer Peter Panagore.
Peace and love, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm here to tell you about my near-death experience and maybe hear some of your comments and questions as we go along. So, in 1981, I was a college student at Montana State University. I was an exchange student from the University of Massachusetts in Massachusetts. And I was there for a year. And when spring came around, I decided that I didn't want to go back to visit my family because there was a situation that had driven me out of my family in the first place. My sister had vanished, run away when I was 14, and the turmoil and stress that it had caused in my family life for my mom and my dad and my rest of my siblings, I didn't want to be there anymore. So I went away for a year to Montana State University in Bozeman. And when spring came around, I decided to go on an outdoor adventure. I'd been an outdoor adventurer since I was a kid. I'd been in the Boy Scouts doing 4-season camping. And by the time this event happened, I had already been backpacking and mountaineering in the White Mountains and the Green Mountains and the Absarokies and the Spanish wilderness peaks all over the place, east and west. And so nature was my thing. I was very comfortable in all the different seasons out in the wilderness. So I found a fella who was going to go up to British Columbia and Alberta for uh, a 10-day ice climbing, snow caving expedition. And turns out that our skills were complementary and we got along. So we went. We did an 8-day snow caving, backcountry skiing, 70-pound pack trip into British Columbia to a place called Mount Assiniboine. And we learned about each other on this expedition in the middle of the wilderness where you have to rely completely on yourself and your partner because no one's going to come and rescue you wherever you are in this deep, deep loneliness and cold. It was March. So we finished this part of the trip and we went back out to do the ice climbing aspect of it. And I was a novice ice climber, but I'd done a fair amount of rock face climbing and mountaineering and those sorts of things. I didn't have all the gear that I needed, so I came up with an axe and a hammer. All the rest of the stuff I had, the crampons and the helmet and harness straps, but I was short a hammer, and I convinced Tim, my climbing partner and backcountry ski partner, that I could do this with a hammer and an axe. Tim had just completed his ice climbing certification class, and he wasn't keen on me doing this, but I talked him into it, and being young and brave and full of bravado at 20, 21 years old, we did this. We made this climb. But because of my gear was not correct, it slowed my climb significantly, maybe doubled the length of my time on the climb than all the other teams on the ice that day. And we were not alone. We were the last team on the ice, but there were others ahead of us. So I'm going to say hi to Melmick and to Jay David. Hey, brothers, glad you're here. Thanks for being here. So anyway, by the time we reached the top of the climb, I had climbed so slowly that it was sunset. And the temperature dropped about 30 degrees as the sun went down. And we knew that we were in a deadly situation. I could tell you the whole entire high adventure mountaineering evening that lasted right to the morning. But I won't because it's pretty long and involved, and I'd rather get to the NDE part of it, the near-death experience part of it. But it's in that book back there over my shoulder. It's available to read if you want to. Suffice it to say that it was a very challenging, traumatic, frightening experience where frostbite and hypothermia were advancing every minute because it got colder and colder through the dark night. We had to traverse across the ice and rappel down and traverse and repel and traverse. Hypothermia, it steals your brain, freezes your eyeballs, makes it difficult to speak, makes all your muscles pulse independently of each other in a palsy sort of way. By the time we reached the final rappel, was many, many, many hours later, and it was traumatic and frightening. And Tim and I both kept our heads because if you panic in the wilderness, you die. So neither of us panicked. We both continued step by step, motion by motion, drove ourselves across the ice with care in the dark, under the starlight, with some moonlight that came eventually. But by the time we reached the final rappel, after many mishaps and adventures, difficulties and challenges, and every step that we took, we were draining our physical energy because we didn't have any more food with us. We had water because we had ice. We could chew on the ice that was all around us. But every step we took drained our energy, and every step we took us deeper into the cold because the night kept getting colder. So our situation continued to get worse. And by the time we reached this last rappel, we were in tough shape. We were clipped into the mountain. The mountain had iron pins epoxied in with iron rings and carabiners, clipped and straps, and I was hooked to my harness. Tim was to my left. I had the rope. We were about 150 feet up on a ledge the size of a big desk, 2 big desks. But we weren't going to fall. This is the first time in the night that we were actually safe from falling. I think about all the dangers we went through that night and that we didn't fall. That alone is a pretty amazing thing. But I had the rope and I tied one into my harness and I took the other end and I tossed it off around the corner and my hands were totally blistered, frostbitten, blistered. My feet had gone from being on fire with cold to not feeling anything at all. And my capacity to reason had been taken from me because that's what happens. You start making poor decisions. But I took the rope and I tossed it out around the corner and I gave it a pull to try to pull it down from the iron ring that was up 100, 150 feet up above us. But as I pulled on the very first pull, the rope got jammed around the corner in some kind of V situation that I couldn't see because it was night and dark and it was around the corner. And as I pulled it again to try to unwedge it, it jammed in tighter. And on the third pull, it was set itself in so much so that I knew that I was never going to get it out. We couldn't reascend back up the rock. I was wearing crampons and I couldn't feel my fingers and it was dark and there was no way that I was going to survive this vertical climb up this rock in the dark without being able to feel anything with my hands or see anything with my eyes. And we couldn't go down because we didn't have a rope to go down. The only way down was to fall. And we weren't going to do that. So after fighting all night long, and I really made this story very short, the high adventure fearful part. But after fighting all night long, I had this peace come over me when I recognized that I was going to die, and there's nothing I could do about it. Hey, Mud Rabbit. Hello, Katina. So I looked up into the stars. I could hear the Saskatchewan River. We were on the Icefields Parkway, if you're familiar with that part of the world, south of Jasper, north of Banff, near Calgary in Alberta, Canada. Banff Provincial Park. I could hear the Saskatchewan River. I could see the tens of millions of really beautiful stars. There was enough light to see because the moon was up and the starlight was bright. And I realized that I was just going to die there and there's nothing I could do about it. I was out of energy, out of time, and the cold was coming fast. So I just accepted my situation. And when I did that, this peace descended on me. And as this peace descended on me, I recognized that it was okay to die. I stopped fighting. I I started thinking about my parents, my sister who had vanished, and I realized that my parents were gonna lose me, and that was gonna be devastating to them, and it was gonna be this international incident, these 2 college students, they died ice climbing, it's gonna make the local news, and it's gonna the news in Boston, and it was just gonna be disastrous for my family, but there was nothing I could do about it. So I accepted it. I started thinking about God. I'd had some experiences when I was younger with out of body mystical experiences, and um, an angelic being had come and taken me and shown me myself when I was quite young, my original self. So I wasn't really afraid anymore. I had been terrified through the night, but when I finally accepted my situation, all of my terror went away. And I kept pulling on the rope, and I would pull on the rope and fall asleep and stand back up and fall asleep and pull on the rope and repeat this process. At one point, I unzipped my coat because I felt hot, even though I knew better. I was on the National Ski Patrol. I knew more about hypothermia and the way that frostbite works than the average person, and I didn't really care. My knowledge made no difference. I felt hot. I unzipped my coat, which of course sped my cold along faster. And so after standing up one of these times after having fallen asleep, because that's one of the final stages of hypothermia is you fall asleep. It's actually a fairly peaceful death once you get past the pain of the frozen fingers and feet. It's a quiet sort of thing. And I stood back up again, and this time as I stood back up, I had this peripheral vision, like a blackness all around me. And I'd never seen that before. And this blackness, it was like a spotlight closing. Fast, 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 and as it closed in on me, I was getting what I now know is called tunnel vision. Having not experienced it, I knew that tunnel vision existed because I'd learned about it with first aid and ski patrol, but it is an entirely different thing to experience it because outside of this circle, I could see nothing. It was like I was blind, and my blindness was getting larger and larger as my vision was getting smaller and smaller. And as it closed down to this final collapse into darkness, I thought, "Oh, must be this is weird. This is really weird. I must be falling asleep." And when it went to dark, it turned out I did not fall asleep. I awoke, which was confusing for me. And and I thought I must have fallen because I was falling asleep, but I felt like I was standing vertically, and where the mountain was, there was this instant deep darkness, and this darkness was velvet dark and warm? Is that a word maybe I could use? It's all metaphor I'm talking now because there's no language I can use to explain what happened to me on the other side. So I was looking into this darkness, kind of confused about who I was and what was going on and why all my pain was gone. Nothing hurt anymore. And I had sort of a shape to me, but I wasn't a human being anymore. I was more like a shadow or a shade. But I had consciousness and I knew who I was. And as I looked out into this darkness, confused at my circumstances, way, way far in the distance, as far away as the North Star. And imagine a night with the only star in the sky is the North Star. And there's no other light. There's no light pollution. There are no stars in the sky, just the North Star. That one star appeared in the great distance for me, and it popped into there was light, and this teeny, teeny, tiny star came rushing toward me. And as it came rushing toward me, it filled my entire view. And as it filled my view with light, it covered this vast distance faster than the speed of light. And it communicated to me directly, um, I'm taking you. And I thought, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm kind of confused. And so I put up all my willpower. I had developed in this depth of willpower driving myself forward through the night that I sort of dug deep into my animal brain, my early hominid brain, or maybe my earlier reptilian brain back in the dinosaur days. Well, I know that that doesn't work out with mammals and dinosaurs, but way back in the depth of my brain, I found this place of survival, and it was survival took me over. so that I wasn't using my rational brain to survive anymore. There was a much deeper part of me that had this will to survive that I can't really describe. But I had access to this, and I pulled that up and I put it up as a shield so that I wouldn't be taken. And because I didn't understand what was going on. And this entity, which now was massive in front of me, this massive light, it told me it was going to take me, and I resisted, and it just took me, plucked me like a daisy out of a meadow, pop, and enfolded me and swept me up. And in my previous out of body mystical experiences, I'd had a connection. People call it the silver cord. You know, when you leave your body, you're connected to your body with the silver cord. Well, in this case, that was severed. There was no connectivity to what had been my body at all. I was completely cut off from it. I was enveloped inside of this angelic being who I knew, but who was communicating to me telepathically without language, uh, intellect, vast knowledge, vast intelligence, vast mercy, vast comfort. And it was feeding me this information, showing me itself and giving me this contentment as it whipped me, whisked me back up in the direction that it had come from to collect me. And I was inside of it, and I no longer had this shade form. I still had a human form, but I was made of light. I had a light body, but and I didn't have an like fingernails and knuckles. I was made of photons, and I was me, and it was speaking comfort to me, and I couldn't move inside of it. I had no capacity to, like, turn my head or anything like that. I could just be with it, but I could see, and when l I could see myself inside of it. I had this superposition thing going on where I was a non-local I outside of my own self in this angelic being, seeing me inside the angelic being, being carried up to the point from which it had departed or arrived in my world, I should say, and into the dark velvet. And when I looked from inside of the angelic being, I couldn't see this non-local I, but I could see me looking for it. I had this superposition. I was in bilocated. I was in two places at once. I had an eye of God seeing me, and me not being able to see that eye of God seeing me, but I could see that I was seeing me. So it swept me up to this edge of the intersection between where it appeared and where I went next. And so we rise up, and it opens up, and I pop out, or it becomes this even vaster darkness, and I am in the middle of a womb, and this womb is the size of our universe, and I am alone in this darkness. And this darkness is not just black darkness, it is light darkness. I can see in every direction at once, although there's no light here, but it's illuminated. And I know that that's contradictory and paradoxical. I don't know what to say about that. But I was this very large energy ball metaphor of consciousness, and my self was my thinking, was my feeling, was my beingness. There was no separation between what I thought and who I was and what I saw. What I mean is what I could see with, because I could see in every direction at once. My seeing was myself. My being was myself. And I knew that this was me, and that this had always been me, and that I'd never been a human being. Not really. I had lived as a human being, but this was my original self, my true self, and I was in a place of no thingness. I was nothing. I had no molecules, and there was nothing recognizable from our universe in this space. and I could see in every direction at once without turning around because I was an eyeball of 10,000 eyes. And I could see the length and the breadth and the depth of this giant womb, this universe-sized space, and I was content in it. I was alone and content, and I knew myself, and at the very edge of this great distance, there was a darkness that I couldn't see into. There was a darkness that was beyond my capacity for understanding. And as I was in this space, the darkness itself, the no thingness, opened and light poured in front of me, if I had a front in one direction, because I really didn't have a face. I didn't have a face or a back of a head, but there was this light that appeared and it was gigantic, the size of Niagara Falls. And I was the size of an ant, and it was white light pouring like a flow, shimmering like fish scales in the light. It was every color of all of the stars on the starriest, darkest night, and the place where there is no light pollution, where all the stars are out and they're all visible and they're pulsating in reds and greens and yellows and all these different sparkles. It was all those colors and all a million other colors and other frequencies, radio frequencies that are invisible to human eyes here, infrared, ultraviolet, and so much more. There was a bazillion colors, and they were all at once color, many, them, and one light. They were white light and many colors at the same time. They were them and one, both plural and singular. And I was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. So I wanted it and it wanted me, and I moved toward it with thought. I thought, I want. And as I thought, I want, I went. And as I went, I touched. And as I touched, it opened me and infilled me and surrounded me and absorbed me. And now it's inside of me and all around me, and I am in it, and it sees me. I see it seeing me. It sees my recent human self. It sees all of my human life. I have no shadow places hidden. It's, you know how sometimes you have some things that you did that you don't want others to know about, or you have things that you did that you don't even want to remember because you didn't like them after you did them. And so we box them away and we put them, and we make these shadow closet spaces where we hide those parts of ourselves, even from ourselves. Well, all of those spaces were illuminated, and there were no dark spaces in me at all. Everything, it was like the eye of Sauron and Tolkien staring at me, this terrible, beautiful eye showing me myself. And as it showed me myself, I could hear myself being called into being. I could hear my original self being made, and that I'd been being made for eons and eons and eons because I'm in timelessness. And so it's I have this length of my life, of my soul life, but also it's always right in the now. I'm always being called into being. And I went through this hell, purgatory, whatever you want to call it. I suffered all of the pain that I gave away to everyone in my life from their interior point of view, feeling their emotions, feeling their anger or their jealousy or their hurt or their surprise, whatever it was that I was intentionally causing them to feel by giving them pain. I felt it from inside of them. And simultaneous to that, I was the person, me, giving them that pain in a chronology, in a series of events where I was both all these other people and always me, experiencing the pain that I gave them from their point of view and my reasons for giving them their pain. And I felt their pain. And the pain that I felt for them from them was 10,000 times bigger than I had anticipated every single time that I thought I was just hurting them. And in all their pain, all their wound had accrued to me, and it was my burden. not theirs. And while this was all going on, the voice of the divine was speaking inside me and around me, saying, I love you. I love you. I have always loved you. I've known everything about you. All of these things that you did, I have loved you even though you did them. While you did them, I still loved you. And yet I could see that they were uh, hurtful and painful to people. And I judged myself. I wasn't judged by God. I judged myself in comparison to this great beauty and love that was being spoken to me, that was purity with a capital P and perfection with a capital P and unlimitedness with a capital U, in unconceivableness, unconceivable love with a capital U and L. It was immense mercy. And as I saw myself and my actions, I felt shame for being human. And as I felt this shame for being human, the voice showed me all of humanity's sins, all of them, everyone's, and they were all the same. There was this equality to them, no matter what it was, and that equality was an equality with me. And the voice had me understand that I didn't make the universe. I didn't write the code for the universe. I'm just a thing living in it, and not to be blamed for my humanness. And that this radical equality of ours, this equalness of our brokenness, is in comparison to the unbroken perfection. And as I saw this, I felt an influx of peace and love and healing, wholeness, beauty, paradise, bliss, awe, understanding, knowledge, peace, adoration. And I inflated and it infilled me, and all of my recognition of my humanity was gone. And I was completely my true self, made by the Creator, who was telling me, I am Creator. I made you. You are creature. I call you into being. I'm being called into being. And I was inflated in this state of bliss where the darkness that was beyond my sight was infilling me with light beyond my ability to express to you. So much so that another droplet from a little dropper, another droplet of this bliss, and I felt like I would have annihilated, obliterated, refolded back into the fullness of the divine being, which I could see had no gender, had no religion, had no form, was incomprehensible to me, but completely and utterly loved me and gave me not only my life, but peace beyond explanation. And while this was all going on, I saw my original self. I don't know how to, I experienced my deepest self. And this deepest part of me, before we went on, Prop and I were talking about being made in the image of God. This image that I was made in the image of was metaphorically, if photonic. I was a singular photon of light superpositioned with this field of photons. And this field of photons was the size of our universe times a septillion, depth and breadth and height. And there were many millions of photons. And these many millions or billions or septillions of photons were all the oneness of being. All this many was one thing. And I was part of it. I was limited from it. I was outside of it, but superpositioned with it. I was made by it, identical with it, of the image of it, but also less than it. But this purity of myself has reoriented my understanding of who I am in this life. And while I was in this state, seeing myself as this in unity, in communion being with all that there is, I saw this lower part of my soul, so to speak. I had this more physical form of me that was elongated like this very, very long baguette. And this very long baguette, I've been using this as my example lately, this very long baguette that was of almost eternal in nature. It was everlasting, and in this baguette, they were like, I have a chopstick here. There were like all these chopsticks shoved into this baguette, and they were spaced apart. And these chopsticks, these were my lives that I was living, my incarnations, and there were hundreds of them, and none of them were me. I was the baguette. I was the oversoul. I was the photon way above them. And so I saw all these lives that I had lived. I entered into two of them. I asked, show me. It showed me. I asked, show me the structure of the universe and how the whole thing works. It showed me. And then I was sort of reduced back down again. And I deflated back to a place where I could remember my parents. And I thought, oh, my folks, they're going to suffer. And I said to the voice, am I dead? And the voice said, yes, you're dead. And I said, well, I can't die right now because got my parents. They're going to suffer if I die. And I was swept across this belly of the divine, this infinite darkness that was illuminated, to this place where there's an interface between matter and energy, where part of me was poked into the universe and I could see in every direction. I was being shown this great spaces between the galaxies, and I was shown way back into the origin of the universe itself. And there was that darkness that was impenetrable to my mind and my sight, and out of that darkness was flowing this light. This light just was flowing out, and as the light flowed out, it became thicker and overlaid with this universe and all of our galaxies, and every I could see that there was light woven inside of absolutely everything there is. There was nothing that was not made of this light. Everything was made of the oneness of this divine being in this in all these different forms. And as I looked, it was popping out other universes, like layers upon layers upon layers of all these other universes very rapidly. And they were all just made out of the light itself, woven into new forms. And as it was showing me all of this, it was communicating to me love, immense love, love that was inexplicable, unexplainable, incomprehensible, and all of the love that it was in and of itself, and the darkness that I couldn't see, and the light that was pouring out, and the universe that I was in, and the universes, all of that love was aimed just at me, as if I were the most beloved being that had ever been created in all the universe. And it spoke to me saying, as I love you now, I have always loved you, always will love you. And because of my love, all is, was, and will be well. And as it spoke to me and showed me this immense love for me, it refocused my attention to Earth. And I could see Earth like a hologram with 7 at the time, billion people on it in live time. They were actually sleeping and awake. And I could see, half the earth is in night and half the earth is in day. And there are people doing things and living their lives. And in the center of every single speck of their hearts was a tiny golden light. And this light was the divine light that wove through all things. And nobody could see it but me. I could see it. And it was obvious and it was brilliantly bright inside of every single person. But there was this fog that covered the earth, and nobody could see it in each other. And the voice said to me, in the way that I love you now, this great particularity of love from me personally, all of the love in the universe was mine for me. It said to me, in that way that I love you now, I love every single person with a particularity and a personal intimacy. that is the same as the way that I love you. And I know that it's impossible to have uh, more than one kind of unique love because unique is unique, but everybody had this unique love. Everybody was as beloved as me. And the voice said to me that nothing is lost. No one is lost. Everything is me. Everything unfolds back into me. I call everything back into myself. There is no one and nothing that is lost. And then it showed me my parents' faces, and I saw mom and dad A and mom and dad B, and mom and dad B was me living with them, and mom and dad A was them living their lives without me. And I could see the end of their lives, and in the end of their lives, they would be in this bliss like me, but that their lives, A and B, without me, their lives were going to be immense suffering. But with me, it was just going to be bad, hard suffering, just not terrifying suffering. And so I saw this and I understood that I had this choice and that I was being welcomed home. Come home to us, come home to me, come home to me. I love you. It's time for you to come home. But also, I was shown that I had this choice that I could go back if I wanted to. And because I experienced timelessness, the length of my human life that I had just lived was a snap of my fingers, no length of time at all. And so I said, if I go back to my life, can I come back here to this paradise? And the voice said, yeah, you can come back here if you go back there, but it's your time. I said, well, then I choose to live my life. And it said to me, you won't live your life. And it sent me out. And as I was cast out of heaven, I was back inside this angelic being and I was being densified. Can I make up a word? Densified, made more dense, thicker. And I was traveling at this rapid speed back toward my body. And then there were 10 million doors in front of me. And all of these doors were choices, a choice that I had to make in order to choose the life I would live. And in the middle of all of these doorways, these entryways, these portals, was this big beam of white light. And I could see back toward heaven that the beam of light came from heaven, but I couldn't see into heaven anymore. And in the middle of all of these doors, this white light was the center of them all. And it radiated out to the edges, and it got less and less light as I went further, as I could see further out. And it was super concentrated in the middle. And the voice said to me, choose a life. Choose light. And I wanted to choose the pure light, but I decided that in an instant that if I were going to be a conveyor of the light, a messenger of the light, I had to have some humanness. I had to be flawed and human. And so I made some choices. And then suddenly I was going through this door that was not in the intensity of the light, off to the side of it, close, but not in the intensity of it. And as I was flown down this tunnel, this tube, this hallway, there were all these other doors in this hallway, and all these other doors led to all these other tunnels, all these a million other tunnels. They're all my choices I could make in my life. And then I got to the end of this tunnel, and there on the cliff was a body. I didn't know it was mine, and it was dangling on the edge, strapped in by the harness, but laying off the edge, and a body over it, shaking it, and I didn't know really what was going on. I could see that there was something troubling, and then this angelic being brought me right up to what turned out to be my body and pierced my body, and stuffed me inside. And when I was compressed way down to this much smaller size, from I had been the size of a house, and now I'm the size of a mouse, and I'm stuffed inside this body, and I can see out through this slit. I can see the angelic being. I can see the back into heaven, and then this slit closed. And as this slit closed, I was trapped inside this thing. And the brain started coming back online. I felt it kind of whir up like a motor, and I was suddenly in pain because I was back in human suffering, and I didn't understand what was going on. And as my brain was coming online again, I began to hear the screaming and shouting, and which didn't resolve into language quite immediately, and then slowly it did, and it was screaming and crying, and I could recognize it as a human voice. And I opened my eyes, and there was a face in my face, and he was crying and screaming and shaking me, and "You're dead. Don't die. Don't die. Don't die. Don't die." And "No, you're not dead. Oh, you were dead." And then he kind of helps me up, and I don't know who I am. I don't know where I am. I don't know who he is. I don't have any idea what's going on. All I know is that where I was myself, and now I'm in exile. And after a little while, I kind of remembered what was going on. And Tim got me to pull the rope, and I pulled the rope, and the rope came free, and we descended. And because our car was right across the street in the parking lot, we got our tent, and we self-treated for hypothermia. And a lot of things happened after that. I became an entirely different person. So that's my quickly told tale. Um, if you have any comments or questions, I'd be happy to answer them. We've got about 15 minutes left. Let's see. You won't live your life, but you will live mindfully going forward. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I came back an entirely different person. Uh, what is this? What is this whole fifth dimension people are talking about? I Not exactly sure what they mean by the fifth dimension. I think it's the level of heaven above where we are now. I'm not familiar with that. It's not inside my experience. It's not language that I use. I think that if I were to take a guess what they mean, I would think that they mean this level of heaven that's here now that we can experience if we are able to get enough out of the way. We find that the light infuses inside us, and then the world around us changes. And that's been my experience over my lifetime. The more I step aside from myself, the more space I have inside myself, the more heaven comes to dwell inside me, and the more that I live inside the oneness of being. Um, Maybe that's what they're talking about. Not really sure. Uh, how is time measured? Well, depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about, if you see, I think it's the movie Interstellar. Have you seen the movie Interstellar? If a planet or a sun has a massive amount of gravity, then there's a gravity well around that planet and or sun, so that time passes differently there. It's not a uniform thing. On Earth, we measure time with clocks and femtoseconds and attoseconds. I think it's like a thousandth of a millionth of a billionth of a second. But where I was, there was no time. Time was timelessness. It was all time and no time. So, as my body ages, I move through time here. I hear a lot of people saying time's not real. Well, time and space, it's a kind of they're two things that make our reality exist, but they're not absolute. Time is not an absolute thing because there is such a thing as a gravity well. Yeah, Interstellar was great as a movie. It was great, wasn't it, Zoe? Um, but my experience of time is that, I'm not from here, and I'm passing through time, but my nature is everlasting. And so instead of focusing on my time, here, I focus on my original self. And I mean, I'm always like, not I'm trying to be on time. I don't get me wrong. Like, if I'm going to a meeting, I ascribe to the idea, if I'm early, I'm on time. If I'm on time, I'm late. And if I'm late, I'm really late. So I try to arrive at all my meetings early. I try to be conscious and kind to other people and their time. I try to pay attention to time in that way. I try to be on time for my granddaughter. I try to be on time for my kids. Um, but time is entirely irrelevant on the other side. Entirely irrelevant. It's not something that there is there. And so because my pursuit of it, um, pursuit of the oneness, steps me outside of the reality of time. And I missed that question. Could you pop that back up again? How were you different after this? I was entirely different, David. Hey, Jay, David. Peace and love, brother. Um, I was an entirely different person. Uh, behaviorally, can I say that? Behaviorally, I was kinder and more compassionate. Um, but mostly I recognized that this meat suit, as somebody said a moment ago over there in the um, chat, this meat suit that I'm in is a totally temporary thing. And I kind of behave as if that's true. So much of my behaviors are rather eccentric for a lot of people. Um, my personality, I still had my allergies. I still had the same physical body. That didn't change, but I treated people differently. I perceived light inside of everything there is. The world to me looked flat and black and white and flickering and thin celluloid, with poor production values from 15, the first original movie. But through absolutely everything pours this light that's always present, even in my bad times. Even when I have a bad day, it is still this light pouring through everything. And so it made me see what others couldn't. And when you see what others can't and you tell them about it, they don't like that very much. They think that you're crazy. So one of the things that changed in my life is I became silent. I stopped talking about this kind of stuff. I kept it to myself. And I drove my interior life because I found that the only way that I could survive in this world was to go inward and to find inside myself that which I already knew was there. I hope that doesn't. I hope that helps. Thank you for relating your experience. You're welcome, Mud Rabbit. You're welcome. I have had the experience of myself as bodiless human form, as you describe, no NDE. Have you experienced that bodiless form other times than your first NDE? Yes. Before my first NDE, I had a whole series through from childhood through college of out of body experiences where I was raptured in Christian language. I was uplifted. I wish had a new age language that I could apply to that, but the angelic being came to me and took me, and well, that's why I knew the angelic being in my NDE and why when I was in my light body, it was familiar to me because I'd already been there and seen it. So yeah, and you don't need a near death experience to have this kind of thing happen to you. And it's more common than you think. I mean, Wendy just talked about it. Wendy had this kind of experience, and she didn't have an NDE. She had an out of body experience where she was her soul and not her body, is a way to put it. And I know her, so that's why I can say that because we've talked about this a whole bunch of times. Hi, Wendy. Thanks for coming tonight. Um, Absolutely beautiful and sacred. Thanks, Dial. I work for the divine. That's one big change. Actually, you asked me about this. There's right now is divine time. Yeah. So one of the things that happened to me in terms of my change is that I became the person that I am. I didn't go into the field that I'd been planning on going into. I had a compulsion. I have a compulsion. Some might call it a passion, but it's more than that, to pursue the pursuer. The one that's after me, I'm after it. And my whole life has been like that. So my whole life became topsy-turvy. I dropped everything that I'd been doing, all the things I'd been pursuing. Well, not everything, but the career path I'd been on, and totally took a left turn and ended up where I am now. Um, Thanks, Julie. Thank you. Yes, well said. Are angel beings tall, like 13 feet high? Um, the proportions of so it was like being inside of a skyscraper. Like if a skyscraper was squished into a ball, that's how big this angelic being was. And I was the size, I have a brass screw here on my desk. I was the size of a brass screw, and this thing was the size of a compressed skyscraper. Um, I think that when I was almost when I was being put back in my body again, then the angelic being was proportionally gigantic, but not that big, as when I was traveling through this velvet darkness. So it changed its size. It changed its shape and it changed its size to something that was more appropriate for me. I know that people see angels here in this realm and they're 13 feet tall. I've not had that experience, so I can't speak to that. But I can say on the other side, they're ginormous, gigantic. You don't need an NDE. I had an out of body experience since I was a kid. Also, angelic visitations my whole life. Exactly, Julie. That is what I'm talking about. You don't need an NDE. These things happen to people. We just don't talk about it because who wants to be the person in a very serious situation at your office and you're the only one willing to talk about the angel who came to visit you and your out of body experiences and everybody else is afraid, so they pretend like they never had one and now you're the oddball out. So there's a lot of social pressure not to talk about it, but lots of people have them. It's pretty common. Even family may not understand completely. Mine totally didn't, but then we always find those who understand us and they become our soul family. Yeah, for sure. My family still loves me, but they can't. I don't blame them. How can they know? How can they understand what they haven't experienced? They can't. It's like, what me trying to understand what it's like to birth a baby. I can't. I don't know. I don't know what it's like. I'll never know what it's like. I can see that it happens. I know that it hurts because I watched it, but for me I don't know. Not really. And that's kind of the way it is with people who don't have these experiences. They just don't know. And it's not their fault. It's not my fault I was born a man and not a woman. I mean, maybe I made that choice before I came here, but I don't know. I don't remember that. The the people who can't see, and it's not their fault. It's just the way it is. And you can love them anyway. So maybe the fifth dimension that people talk about is where everyone gets to see the light that you see. I think so. I think at least that's what that I can't speak for everybody else, but I can say that the more I aim my interior world at the oneness of being, the more light I see here. And I already see a lot of light here. I came back seeing light. And I'll tell you, it was pretty freaky because nobody else could see it. And so when you're seeing it in people, everybody you meet, everybody you meet, you fall in love with because they're radiating the light. That's kind of weird in terms of social relationships. Let me tell you. And the more I got used to that, and the more I created space inside myself by getting out of the way, my egoic self, getting myself out of the way through my centering practice, the brighter the light became in the world around me, and the brighter the light the world became around me, the easier it is for me to negotiate the world with other people. And I could definitely see the light inside other folks, especially those who have a lot of it. And so we kind of share this higher heaven, fifth dimension. And so one day I was at this International Association for Near Death Studies conference about 2 years ago. And I was with a friend of mine. She lives on Maui, and we're having breakfast and having this conversation about how we live in this different world than other people, and it's like everywhere we live in this dense world of the physicality, but we also live in this other world of this heaven, this fifth dimension, you could call it, where this is really where we live. This is what we see. This is how we experience it, and we also experience this world down here. But the people who don't experience this, they don't know that it even exists. Um, would you call heaven or heavenly places or astral realm Disneyland? You don't know this, but you're touching a button on me. I got harassed at Disneyland just after my near death experience. I was I went to Disneyland. I was traveling in a theater company, and we went to LA. And I had long hair, and I looked kind of freaky, and I got pulled aside. And so I was like, oh, so this is Disney World. They pull aside hippies, huh? Um, No, it's not like Disney World at all. It's, more like the best orgasm that you've ever had times a bazillion. and you don't lose. You don't lose. That's all it is. You just don't lose. It's just win, 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 win. It's ecstatically beautiful from the inside out. Bliss. Mm. But if you want to think about it as Disneyland, go ahead. It's okay too. Only the esoteric knows. Yeah, that is the truth. Fifth dimension is a human concept, but it sounds amazing. Yeah, it's a human concept. The presence of the divine, all this stuff is human concept. All the words I'm saying are human concept. The only the only place that I know that is real is this divine energy that I've created space for inside myself. It is me already. I've just stepped aside enough to let it grow inside of me so that I can have the presence with me even when I'm having a tumultuous day. Um, but the language around it, it's all made up. Heaven, fifth dimension, Allah, Allah, Yahweh, the name, Brahma, Brahman. We made up all those names. The divine energy is so far beyond us that the best way for me is to feel it and experience it rather than speak about it. We can only ever completely understand what we ourselves have personally experienced. Oh, yeah, totally true. It's completely subjective. And that's why I talk only through my experience. And if I'm going to say something that I didn't experience, I tell people I'm thinking it might be this, or I'm guessing it might be that, or that's outside my experience, but this is what I think about it, as opposed to this is what happened to me. And in terms of my personal life, it's this is what happened to me that matters the most to my spirituality. I share my experiences with my wife. She doesn't understand, but listens with love. Tom, I hear you, brother. I'm right there with you. I was talking to my wife the same way today. Um, Thanks for being here, brother. Did it feel like home, like you were there before? 100% preliminal. Yeah, it was home. That's how I think of it. It's home. It's not only that I'd been there before, it's that I'm still there. That's how my problem is being here. I'm still there. And how do I integrate here while I'm still there? But yeah, 100% home. Where I'm from, where I'm going. That's why I'm not afraid of dying. Oh, dying can be hard, but death, beautiful. I'd love to know more about the velvety dark place Peter talks about. Well, it's like a I said velvet because it's so sensually soft and tactile and warm and inviting and dense and comforting and welcoming. It's and it was the space between. So there was this darkness that when I first died, and then I was carried through this darkness to this greater darkness. This velvety darkness, it was a space in between, a dimension of travel for me to get from here to, excuse me, here to heaven. Ah, thanks, Tiffany. Good to see you here tonight, too. Words are just our human attempts to communicate that which no words can speak on the other side. That's true. The words are just our human attempt to communicate that which needs no words on the other side. Completely true. Well, my friends, I should probably get going. It's my bedtime here on the East Coast, and I should probably go to bed because I got to get up in the morning. Thanks for being here. Um, Love you guys. I know there are a bunch of East Coasters here. I can see there's a bunch of Mainers here too. Thanks for being here tonight, everybody. And thank you for Prop for having me. Sure appreciate it. Peace and love, everybody. May you all be blessed.